Okay, hi. That was my cat, Elias. He is the middle cat. Our oldest cat is 12-ish, and Elias is 3, I think. And our youngest cat's about a year old. Anyway, that will be on your test. No, I'm kidding. Um, uh, we're doing the collapse of the Roman Empire and the onset of the Dark Ages in Europe today. I say today as if the other videos haven't also been today. They were. Anyway, we're doing collapse of the Roman Empire and the onset of the Dark Ages. Um, so that will be a whole big thing. All right. So we start our story with Constantine, who got mentioned in the video where we talked about the spread of Christianity. We talked about Constantine, who converted to Christianity and became sort of the guy who kind of made Christianity into a religion, a state religion, rather than a religion for underdogs and outsiders. Um, anyway, today I'm gonna today in this video I'm gonna talk about another aspect of Constantine's rule that's going to have massive consequences for the Roman Empire. So, okay, let's look at this. So, let's start right off. In 330 CE, Constantine declares a new capital in the east, Constantinople. Okay, so this is what's happening here is how to put this exactly. Okay, let me put it this way. Um, the Persians are back. Remember in the crisis of the third century, the remember that the Persians are back. Um, we have a lot of wars going on in the eastern part of the Mediterranean. Now, what that means in practical terms for the Roman Empire is that the emperor was basically more concerned with what was going on in the eastern part. That is Greece, Anatolia, or what we would call Turkey now, um, the sort of left side of the Fertile Crescent around Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, and Egypt. The emperor's attention was entirely on that area because that's the area where they were contesting with. That's the area where Rome was contesting with Persia. So what happens is in 330, Constantine does something radical and essentially splits the empire in two. We've still got Rome here as the capital in the center of the Roman Empire, or at least traditionally that's how it's been. But what Constantine does is he designates a new capital here at Constantinople. In other words, Constantine town. Um, and basically, he says, hey, I'm more concerned with what's going on in the East than the West. Now, rather than just moving the capital, he maintained Rome as the capital of the Western Roman Empire and made Constantinople the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. So there were two, count them two, emperors at any given time, an emperor in Rome and an emperor in Constantinople. And the emperor in Rome ran the Western Roman Empire, and the emperor in Constantinople ran the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay, so that is just an bonkers, absolutely bonkers plan. Um, uh, in the process, he essentially just kisses off the western half of the empire entirely. He's not concerned with it anymore. He says, I'm going to focus on fighting the Persians and things like that. Now, why on earth would he do this? Well, here's the thing. Remember what I said about Italy being when I was talking about, Rome when it was just getting started, and Italy is not that impressive in terms of resource production. This is Tunis and other North African countries, Spain, um, Germany, largely forests at this point, France and Germany, largely forests. France has some decent land, that's fine. But the Eastern Roman Empire has Egypt, it has part of the Fertile Crescent, it has the Anatolia, or what we would call Turkey, it has Greece. Um, all the money, so to speak, and the resources are in the East, particularly in Egypt and the Western Fertile Crescent. These two areas are particularly rich and rewarding. So what happened is basically what Constantine did was he took the Roman Empire and he took the most lucrative parts of the Roman Empire and he split them off and said, these are mine. These are the parts of the Roman Empire that generate the most money for us, and you get stuck with the parts of the Roman Empire where there's still a lot of untamed barbarians, and where you need an army to deal with that. But we're not going to give you a tax base, in essence, to pull from. The Eastern Roman Empire was sophisticated and wealthy. The Western Roman Empire, except for Rome itself, which is, still considered a pretty, amazing city. They've called it the Eternal City for a reason. But outside of Rome itself, the Western Roman Empire didn't have a lot going for it very much. So what Constantine did was he essentially took the best parts of the Roman Empire and said the rest of it could, hit the bricks. Um, it could get abs. It could just, go get bent. While he fought the Persians and collected all the taxes from the east. So, okay. I'm sure that you will agree that there's no way this plan could turn out badly, right? Um, Obviously, it's going to. Um, what we get is uh, for the balance of the fourth century, nothing whatsoever improves in the West. The Eastern Empire is stable and prosperous. The Western Empire is absolutely not. Then, starting in 406, we have massive groups of tribes from what we would now call Germany start moving into Roman territory in the west, trying to get away from the Huns. Okay, let's talk about that just a bit. Okay, so the Huns were a nomadic people uh, that originated out of sort of Eastern Europe ish region. And they, for reasons we won't get into right now, they started in the late 4th, early 5th century. They started pushing west through this territory and up against what we would now call significant parts of Germany here. Um, German tribes that were allied with the Roman Empire, remember the Socii, German tribes that were allied with the Roman Empire uh, started moving into Rome to flee the Huns. Huns. Uh, Huns. It's that stuff that Winnie the Pooh likes. Wait, no, that's honey. But yeah, these German tribes started fleeing into the Western Roman Empire. Now, these were formally, legally speaking, allies of Rome, mostly, but it still caused a lot of trouble. For two reasons. First of all, this is a large number of people suddenly moving into Roman territory, looking for land to farm, places to settle, things like that. It was a huge strain on resources. Rome was not prepared to accept this many refugees essentially coming into its land. It didn't know what to do. And that brings us to the other reason, which is that Roman policy, the Rome could not settle on a policy for how to deal with this. Some Western Roman emperors welcomed these people and tried to help them get settled and find land that they could work so that they could feed their people. Other Western Roman emperors uh, uh, deployed the army to stop them or kill them. Um, it was an entirely inconsistent uh, set of responses that only served to aggravate relations between Rome and these German tribes and set up an acrimonious relationship with them. So things were like primed to just go very, very badly. Okay, so that is why in 410 the Visigoths, one of the German tribes that moved in, sacked Rome, burning and looting the whole place. So basically, what happened was the Visigoths were one of these tribes that uh, Rome had antagonized as they tried to move into Roman territory, and in response to that, the Visigoths uh, went down across the Alps here and into Italy and attacked Rome itself and absolutely laid it to waste, which was incredibly shocking because I told you that the Roman military had a reputation for being absolutely, the next closest thing to invincible. Um, and now things have degenerated in the West so much that these barbarians were able to come in and sack Rome. Of course, the secret is that a lot of these barbarians had served in the Roman military, so they knew the Roman way of fighting. Rome liked to recruit from among its socii, the allied tribes, and there were Visigoths, lots of Visigoths, including leaders, who had served in the Roman military for 20 years or more and attained high rank. They spoke Latin, they knew how to fight like Romans, they knew how to lead armies. It was not a good situation. Basically, Rome had given these German tribes the military education they needed to respond in force when Rome tried to kick them out or kill them. So, anyway. So, yeah, so this is not good. Um, Obviously, or maybe not so obviously, but for those of us who've been paying attention to it, the Eastern Emperor over in Constantinople could not have possibly cared less because it wasn't affecting his taxes that he was collecting. And it definitely wasn't doing anything to help him with his war with Persia. So, anyway, things continued to get bad in the Western Empire. And there were more conflicts with the German tribes that were moving in. In fact, one German tribe, let's see here, one German tribe caused a huge amount of trouble. They moved in and they went down through Spain, crossed into North Africa at the Strait of Gibraltar, and basically took over uh, North Africa, the area that used to be Carthaginian. They took over that whole area. And the funny part of it is that these barbarians that caused so much trouble and so much destruction were called the Vandals. That's where we get the word vandal and the word vandalize. It actually comes from these German tribespeople that were such a pain in the butt for the Romans. Oh, darn, I didn't show you the slide. Okay, let me do that again. So yeah, so these people, they came down through Spain and into North Africa and took over the area that was Carthage, and they were called the Vandals, and that's where we get the word Vandal or vandalism. So anyway, um, so for the balance of the 5th century, things are going, for the 400s, 5th century, things are going pretty bad. In the West, anyway. In the East, it's gliding along fairly smoothly, but it's going bad in the West. Um, Rome is effectively losing control over the territory of Gaul here. It's effectively losing control over the territories outside of Italy. It lost North Africa to the Vandals. North Africa no longer under Roman control. Gaul rapidly losing control. Rome had to pull out of England, and England went back to being out of Roman control. Um, Things are going bad. The Western Roman Empire is falling apart, quite literally. Um, so anyway, in 476, it's all winding down by the mid to late 5th century. In 476, a German general named Odoacer, weird name, right? Odoacer. Odoacer. A German general named Odoacer kills the emperor of the Western Empire and his kid, just to be sure, and renounces all obligation to the empire. Odoacer is in charge of the West, but he has very specifically called himself a king and not an emperor, and he seems to have no interest in maintaining even the appearance of Roman institutions. Okay, let's unpack that. So, there was a lot of fighting. I told you how unstable the emperorship had become, especially in the West. The Praetorian Guard was killing the emperor they didn't like. There was a period of, at one point, things were so bad that there was 1 year where there were like 6 emperors in the space of 1 year because they kept getting killed. Um, Not good. That's not a sign of stability. Um, if we went through 6 presidents in 1 year, things would be pretty bad. So things were getting very, very bad in the West. And this Odoacer guy basically comes into Rome. He sacks Rome again, just like they did in 410. He sacks Rome, pillages it, burns it. He kills the emperor, kills the emperor's son. And then, up until now, look, it's not like no one had ever come in and killed the emperor. That had happened lots of times. But the people who did that would then say, now I'm the emperor, right? It was video game logic, right? You kill the emperor, you become the emperor. Um, sure, it's just how it worked. Odoacer didn't do that. He killed the emperor, and basically people around him were like, so are you the emperor now? And he's like, I don't even want the job. Um, I don't even want to be emperor. He's a king. He's a king of the Germans. Um, that he'll take that title, and I'll talk about German kingship in a minute. He'll take that title, but he won't take the title of emperor. So there's no emperor. There's just no emperor at this point. Um, the Eastern Roman Empire makes a half-hearted attempt to bring the West back under control. It'll make several half-hearted attempts to do this over the next maybe 100 years. It'll try a few times to bring the West back under control, but it never commits a lot of resources to it, and it's not going to go very well. And then in 480, the Eastern Emperor, so it will try again after this, but the Eastern Emperor formally declares that the Western Empire is over. Dunzo, kaput, finis, that's all, folks. And that's the ball game. In 480, when the Eastern Emperor basically says there's no emperor in the West, it's done. There's no imperial authority in the West. That's it. There's no Western Roman Empire. Rome has fallen. The city is still there, but it's not what it once was, and it's certainly not the center of an empire anymore. At its height, during the Pax Romana, Rome, a city without modern roads, without modern conveniences like we enjoy, um, Rome had a population of over 1 million people. That's more people than live in Tulsa. Rome was receiving twice daily shipments of grain from Egypt just to keep all the population of the city fed. It was a city that was huge, absolutely staggeringly large for that part of the world. By the time that Odoacer kills the last emperor, the population of Rome has fallen to under 100,000. Um, Entire sections of the city stood empty, choked by weeds. Um, One Roman writer said that there were sections of the city that were entirely ruled by wolves and thieves. Lawless men hiding out in abandoned parts of the city, and wolves roaming the streets of Rome, because there aren't enough people there to stop them. Uh, that's bonkers. The eternal city, the city that had stood at the heart of one of the most powerful empires that had ever been known uh, on the earth at this time. Rome was just a shadow of itself. Um, it was nothing. It had been reduced to nothing. Multiple times burnt and sacked, looted by Germans. Its armies humiliated. Uh, and that was that. That's the fall of the Roman Empire. Okay, now we do need to talk about a few things that play into this, or at least that have a role in this, um, to help you understand what's going to happen here when we go into the Dark Ages. Okay, so, okay. Um, okay, let me talk about kingship, German kingship first. So, I need to tell you a little bit about these German tribes that were moving into Roman territory, because they're going to become the new masters of Europe. And you need to know about the kind of society that they had. They practiced simple kingship. We've talked about that in other videos, so I don't need to go into that. They practiced simple kingship, and they were led by the people that were sort of in charge, the people from among whom the king was chosen, were fighting men and women, of course. But there's good archaeological evidence now that a lot of women in German society also did the fighting. Um, so anyway, so it was very equal in that regard. So, but the people who were sort of the most prominent and the leaders of the community were the fighters. And the fighters were all of the adult men and a good portion of the adult women. This was a society, these Roman tribes were a thoroughly militarized society. There wasn't a special group of people. Like in Rome, the Roman military, they were professional soldiers. They were just that was their job, and the soldiers are over here doing their job. They're members of the army, and then the rest of the citizenry got on with what they were doing as civilians. But in the German society, if you were an adult male, or in some cases an adult woman, you were a warrior. That's just what it was. It was, you were expected to be a fighter. You were expected to be able to fight. Um, and so the German society was thoroughly militarized, and their kings were frequently chosen for their military prowess, or their ability to fight. Um, okay, why does this matter? Well, here's a thing. Here's how a mix that's going to go on. These Germans came and settled in Roman territory, and they assimilated some elements of Roman culture, but not all of them. Now, one of the most enduring elements of Roman culture that I talked about way back in a different video was the patron-client system. The patron-client system in Rome was fundamentally a civilian concern. Civilians ran the Roman Empire. The members of the Senate were lawyers and scholars and things like that. They were civilians. And they were the wealthy patrons that you would appeal to when you wanted anything done. When you wanted the institutions of Rome to help you out. They were the ones that could get your charges dropped in court. They were the ones that could help you get an apartment. They were the ones that could help you, with whatever official thing you needed going on. Now, in German society, the people running everything are the warriors. They are not the civilians, right? The people running everything are the professional. Well, not professional, but they are definitely fighters. They are the warriors. But the idea of patronage was something they absorbed from the Romans. And in a time of instability, when Roman institutions are collapsing, what happened was people in the areas, like in Gaul, where these German tribes had a lot of influence, people in those areas, if they needed to feed their families, or if they needed, like let's imagine you're a worker in Rome, some kind of middle class worker in Roman territory, in Roman Gaul. But because the institutions, the tax collection, and everything like that has completely collapsed at this point, Roman officials haven't been paid, so they've quit. They've left the area. The courts are not functioning. It's just all of the official institutions are not working anymore. It would be like, imagine if suddenly nobody who worked for the Tulsa city government got paid for months on end. You couldn't just go down to City Hall and do stuff, because those people wouldn't be there anymore. They would have left to find work that paid them. It would just be gone. It would be empty. The institutions would stop functioning. Um, If nobody in the police department got paid, the police would stop doing their jobs, and we could do whatever we wanted. Uh, so that would be, becomes chaos. So that's what's happening, right? Rome is circling the drain, in the West at least. Things are falling apart. The central government is in chaos because emperors are getting killed left and right. Nobody knows who's in charge. The tax base is collapsing. The whole thing. So if you're a worker, a tradesman, or a craftsman in Roman Gaul, and someone hasn't paid you for your work, you can't just take them to court because the courts don't work anymore. The courts aren't there anymore. You need someone that will help you resolve this dispute and help you get paid. So you can still go to a patron, but that patron won't be a rich guy who is going to intercede with, who's going to help you with the institutions of Rome, because those don't exist anymore. It's going to be, you're going to go, and your patron is going to be a German king, or a local German tough guy who has a sword and knows how to use it, and a bunch of friends who have swords and know how to use it. That's who you appeal to. When society is falling apart, you need someone who can get tough, who knows how to fight. And that's what the Germans brought into this society. So gradually, over the course of the last 100 years, in the 5th century, gradually what was happening is the civilian class of people that ran Rome were losing power to the warrior class, basically the entirety of the adult male population in the German tribes, to the warrior class of the German people that had come into Roman territory and settled there. And this was creating a society that was not based on laws or institutions, public institutions. It was creating a society that was based on violence, where the people who do violence are in charge of it. And how do they resolve problems? With violence. That's how that was going. So this is sort of, as the society is collapsing, basically local strongmen, local thugs with swords are taking power, and that is sort of as we slide into what is called feudalism. Okay, let me give you the skinny on feudalism. Okay. Feudalism is actually, you know what? Let me it is a way of organizing society based on the exchange of promises. Okay, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that in feudalism, I told you about how the patron-client system worked. Feudalism is just sort of the more, I don't want to, I guess I'll just say it this way, is the more primitive version of the patron-client system. You've got a guy with a sword. You've got the local strongman with a sword, and his buddies who can fight with him. So he's a tough guy. And then you've got regular people like you and me who can't protect themselves in an increasing situation of anarchy. And what happens is this guy accepts your promise to provide service to him. You will specifically, the service that you're going to provide is you're going to grow food. So he doesn't have to spend his time growing food. You grow food and provide some of your food to him. And in return, he provides you with protection. He's going to protect you from the other thugs with swords. He's going to keep you safe from the other googs with swords who are going to try to fight with him and take all of his land and all the people who live on the land, because then they will have more food and they will be wealthier, such as it is. Okay. Okay, so um, basically then, what you have is a lord. Well, that didn't work out. Okay. A lord and a vassal. These are the terms in feudalism. And all of society became organized during the collapse of the Roman Empire in the West. European society became organized around these exchanges of promises, which is to say that there wasn't anyone who was not involved in the system in some fashion. If you were living in feudal Europe, you were either a lord or a vassal, although technically speaking, some lords were also vassals to other people, other more powerful lords. That's much better. Um, okay. So this is the essence of feudalism. Okay. Now, so the institutions, the interesting thing about this, well, I'll talk about that in a second. So, what are the characteristics of feudal society? Well, first of all, violence. Um, the fundamental element of the exchange of promises is that the Lord will protect you. The Lord will exert violence on other people to protect you, and if you do not fulfill your obligations to him, the Lord will exert violence on you. Um, that is just how it went. The Lord basically took the right, the Lord claimed the right to perpetrate violence on basically anyone that they felt like it, to perpetrate violence on their competitors, the people that they wanted to take land from. Let me put it this way. It's not like again, if there's a corporation that wants to take over another corporation in our society, they do complicated stuff with stocks, and they go to court, and they do mergers and acquisitions and blah, 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 blah. And it's all done with paper. And it's all done by civilians. And it's very illegal and bullshitty. No offense to any of your business majors. You know what I mean. It's all very, it's done without violence. But those institutions were gone. There is only the class of warriors left, and the class of people that grow the food for the warriors, so to speak. That's it. Technically speaking, there's also religious people, but we'll get into that at another time. The church is going to be a very big deal in feudal Europe for reasons I will explain. But anyway, this division in society, if you're a feudal lord and you want to take over the lands of the next feudal lord over. You can't, like, do a leveraged stock buyout and take him to court or anything like that. That doesn't exist. Um, you can either marry your kid to his kid and hope that they'll inherit it at some point, or you can just go kill him and take his land. Ta-da! It was a society based on violence. It was not based on the rule of law. It was based on killing each other. Okay, so that brings us to the next characteristic. The next characteristic of feudalism is localism. Let me explain what that means. So, the thing about feudalism is that feudalism arises out of the failure of a centralized society. Feudalism isn't just something that happens, like naturally. Feudalism happens when centralized authority collapses. And when centralized authority collapses, every local tough guy who has some other tough guys with him and who can claim some power for themselves gets some power. So imagine central power in the institutions of Rome. And imagine this big thing that's made of glass, and someone hits it with a hammer, and it shatters into a million pieces, and those pieces scatter. And if you think of each one of those pieces as a little bit of power, a little bit of the authority of the central institutions of Rome that has now been claimed by some local tough guy with a sword and his friends who are local tough guys with swords as well. The local tough guys were absolutely the kings. Well, I shouldn't use the word king. I don't want to confuse you. Local tough guys were the top dogs in their little domains. They passed judgment on things. They held court. That's a literal phrase. If someone had a dispute, they would go before the local tough guy and ask them to make a judgment on it. And he didn't have a constitution he had to follow or anything like that. He would just decide whatever he decided, and if people didn't like it, they get stabbed. So that's not. That's just how that worked. The local tough guy with the sword ran everything in his little. He had absorbed all of the power to run everything, but only within his very local area. Go a few miles over and you'll run into some other area with its own local tough guy, and he's the top dog in that little area. Go another couple of miles and you'll run into another area with another local tough guy, and he's the top dog in that area. And then they fought each other all the time. So it's not like travel or trade was super easy. This was a time, feudal society is characterized by localism of the power structures. Remember the map I showed you? When the Roman Empire was functioning properly, it had the authority of Rome before everything split. The authority of Rome extended from Scotland to North Africa, to Egypt, to the Fertile Crescent, to the shores of the Black Sea. It's just crazy. One city, through a complex network of legal structures, one city was able to rule all of this. Was able to set up and rule all of that. In feudalism, things are inherently local. Feudalism does not create stable, large-scale domains, not easily. There would be attempts, by feudal lords, powerful feudal lords who called themselves kings because they answered to no one else. Uh, Basically, you're a king if you don't have to be a vassal of someone. Um, there would be kings that tried to carve out large parts of Europe and make them domains, but those domains weren't stable. They wouldn't last. We're going to hear about some of them in later videos. Feudalism is an inherently localized way of running things. It's not good for exerting power over a large area. Um, okay. And then the last major characteristic of feudalism is the loss of the public sphere. Okay. Let me add another slide so I can illustrate what I mean by the public sphere. Okay. Let's say this is you and, well, okay. So this is you. Presumably, you have a house or an apartment or something where you can go. And the apartment or the house is yours or a family member's, but it's private. It is a private property. That is to say that it is not owned. That is to say that there is a particular person or persons who control access to this property. And they are the ones in charge of who gets to be there and who doesn't get to be there. You can't just walk into someone else's house. Even places where the public goes a lot of the time, even places where the public goes a lot of the time, many of those things are private property. Like for instance, the local Taco Bell, which I'm thinking about because I'm always thinking about Taco Bell. Just I love me some Taco Bell. I know it's disgusting. I realize that. I mean, you don't need to tell me. I eat there a lot. You don't need to tell me Taco Bell is horrifying. And you don't need to tell me that the food isn't Mexican food. It's Taco Bell food. Like, there's nothing else on the planet like it. Taco Bell is making up shit as they go along. Doritos tacos? What the hell? Where did that even come from? I don't know what their latest abomination is. They change too fast for me to keep up. But it's something horrifying. And they'll come up with something new horrifying soon. Anyway, I got distracted. Taco Bell. Your local Taco Bell is owned by somebody. Either someone who operates it as a franchise or the corporation, the Taco Bell Corporation. And so it is private property. If the Taco Bell Corporation decides that they're just not going to do business one day, you can't go in. They're just not going to let you in. If the owner of the franchise decides to throw you out and tell you never to come back, you can't go in. It's private property. It's just private property that a lot of people use, and that's okay. But there's also public property in our society. The sidewalks, the parks, the courthouses and things like that. There's no private individual who owns those things. The courthouse is owned by all of us. Now, there are rules about when you can go in and so on and so forth. That may sound like the same kind of rules you have with a Taco Bell. But those are rules created by people that we've elected to represent us. If we really wanted to, we could start a petition to have the courthouses open, change the courthouse hours, and we could go through the process of talking to the city council and make them vote on it, and maybe they would vote our way, and then the courthouse hours are changed. Cool. The parks, the sidewalks, these are public places. The streets, these are public places. We all have a right to be in these places. Nobody owns them. They are owned collectively by us, by the public. That's why they're called public places. They are owned by the public. So, the thing about Republican Rome and even Imperial Rome, because Imperial Rome arose out of the ashes of the Republic and still maintained a pretense of being a republic in some ways. The thing about Republican Rome is that it had lots of public spaces, spaces that were owned by the people of Rome, basically. There was a stamp that they would put on a lot of stuff. SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. And it meant that this was owned by the Senate and the people of Rome. SPQR, Senatus Populusque Romanus. Senate, or Romani. My Latin's a little rusty. Anyway, whatever. No, I think it's Romanus. Senatus Populusque Romanus. Okay. Anyway. Just trying to remember the ending of that. Yeah, Senatus Populusque Romanus. Okay. I won't go into... Anyway. We won't go into that. Okay. Owned by the Senate and the people of Rome. Public property. There were plenty of these places in Rome. But the thing about feudalism is there are no public spaces like that. There's nothing in feudalism. Well, going to the wrong thing. There we go. In feudalism, somebody owns everything. And it's pretty much the lord, the local lord. He owns everything. If you are growing food for him on a farm, that's not your farm. That is land he is letting you use. And you have to use, and the price of letting you use it is you give him some food. Some of what you grow there. And then you get to keep some for yourself and hope to God that it's enough after you fulfill your obligations. There are no public spaces in feudalism. Even the church, which we'll talk about, like I said, in probably the next video? No, video after that. Even the church was not a public space because the church was kind of like the Taco Bell Corporation in this case. All of the churches, they were not owned by the people, they were owned by the church. And so it's private property that gets public use, but is ultimately still private property. So in feudalism, the entirety of the system runs on violence. It is an inherently local system, and it is a system where there is no public spaces, just spaces owned by the local lord that sometimes he lets you use, which is a pretty raw deal. And it certainly is not a good situation for the people to be in, the common people, because in Rome, the common people, literally, a lot of Rome was theirs. It belonged to them. It belonged to them and their elected officials, and these people had rights. They were citizens, and they had a constitution that protected them and the rule of law, and all that's gone. All that you have is a guy who owns everything in your whole area, and he gets to say what happens. Like imagine a small town in Oklahoma. I know that's going to be hard for you. Imagine a small town in Oklahoma. And some rich asshole buys up everything in this town. Tiny little town. And he buys everything. And I mean everything. The sidewalks, the parks. He somehow manages to buy up all the roads. He buys every house. He buys every business. He has total control. You live in this little town, and he lets you live in one of the houses that he owns, but basically only if you do what he wants. Like, you can go to your job, but he owns that too. And in order to give you the privilege of having a job and making some money to live on, you have to give him some of the money that you make, which is, that's just kooky. Um, or you have to spend one weekend a month working in his garden or something, whatever. The point is, he owns everything. He's the guy in charge at that point. And even then, that still doesn't communicate just what a bleak situation feudalism was, because even in this tiny town where this guy has bought everything, there would still be some public institutions functioning, in theory, because you can't buy a courthouse, you can buy the courthouse maybe, but you can't buy the court. It's authorized by law. Okay. Let's not get into the depressing idea of buying the courts. Anyway, don't read any news about the Supreme Court. It'll depress you. Anyway, but yeah, so this guy, imagine if this guy owned all the houses and owned all the businesses, and then he was also the mayor and the head judge and the sheriff and every other damn thing. That would suck. And that's what we're talking about. A violent system, essentially a local system, and a system where there are no public spaces anymore. And it evolved out of German simple kingship, because German simple kingship was fundamentally based on violence and fighting. And as society collapsed, the German warrior class became the people that you went to, rather than the old civilian patrons of the Roman patron client system. So that's what happened there. So over the space of, let's see here, over the space of the mid 4th century through the almost the end of the 5th century, so about 150 years ish. And honestly, really, you can boil that down to about 100 years. A little less, from 406 to 480, so about the 5th century. Even though Rome managed to rally, it had a shitty 3rd century. The 200s went very badly for Rome. It rallied a little bit in the early 300s. But then it got split in half. It rallied a little bit in the early 300s. And then it just started to decline from the mid 300s down to the early 400s. And then from 406 to 480 was a speed run of just completely falling apart and going to hell in a handbasket. That was it. That's all she wrote. All of the institutions of Rome had collapsed, and the only law in the vast majority of the Roman Empire was the law of the sword, was the law of violence, And so if you wanted any kind of protection or to get anything done, you had to go to the local thug with a sword. You had to go to the local lord, and that was that. So that's the fall of the Roman Empire. Um, it takes time. It takes a while. I don't know if it fell so much as it slowly slid off the couch onto the floor and then couldn't get back up. Um, and we've all been there. Um, but it definitely that was definitely the end of things, um, and it was pretty bad. So anyway, um, that's it. That's the Roman Empire. Rome lasted from about 500 when it became a republic, 500 BCE when it becomes a republic, um, to about 500 CE. It's cut almost right down the middle from republic to empire because it becomes an empire in about the year 30 BCE. So 407 years of republic and then 530 years or thereabouts of empire. So almost exactly half as a republic and half as an empire. So it lasts about 1,000 years. Rome does. And it has about oof, maybe 400 good years and not all in a row out of those 1,000. Not a great batting average. Um, and by the way, the Western Empire, after the Western Empire goes kablooey, uh, the Eastern Empire is still going to continue on for a while. Although the Eastern Roman Empire, interestingly enough, is going to be speaking over time, rather than Latin, they're going to wind up speaking Greek. So what we're going to have is, in the Eastern Roman Empire, they're not even they're going to be speaking Greek, and they changed the name from Constantinople to Byzantium. But, technically speaking, they are still the inheritors of the Roman Empire, and they're going to keep going without suffering collapse. They're going to keep going without... damn it, I did it again, where I get in transition. Yeah, they're going... So the Western Empire goes kabooey. The Eastern Roman Empire is going to manage to hang on without suffering a collapse, although it will have various crises that cause problems. But the Eastern Roman Empire is going to keep going while the West descends into feudalism, and the East will continue on all the way up through the 1400s. So the East will make it about another 1,000 years, almost, until the 1400s, when it is conquered by the Ottoman Turks and becomes part of the Ottoman Empire. And the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman Empire lasts from the medieval period up through 1918. So the Ottoman Empire, which starts in the medieval era, lasts until there are tanks and planes, because the Ottoman Empire will get involved in World War I, and that's when it finally collapses, when they lose World War I as one of the losing powers there. So, good for them. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, and definitely not part of the Humanities 1 class. So anyway, so that's the fall of Rome. The fall of the Western Roman Empire, and the nature of the feudal society that replaces it in Western Europe. So, okay, go forth and answer the questions.